Then there's the running. The moment I bolted, legs pumping, flashlight swinging, the trail blurring into a tunnel of dirt and pines. Home was 150 yards away, then 100, then 80, and every step was a choice, a refusal to let the dark win. I'd never been a runner. Track in high school was a disaster, and my 5Ks were more about the free t-shirts than the finish line. But that night, I flew. My dad's voice echoed in my head, that old barbecue memory of him saying, "You push, till it's over." And I did. The footsteps chased me, 15 feet, maybe less, and I felt them, a weight at my back, a hand reaching but never quite closing. That's the second lesson. You don't have to be fast, you just have to keep going. Life's full of chases, deadlines, doubts, losses that stalk you like shadows on a trail. But it's not about outrunning them forever. It's about outlasting them, one step at a time, until you break through to the light. You don't need to be a marathoner, you just need a heartbeat and a will to move. That night taught me my legs could carry me farther than I'd dreamed, and yours can too. Through the woods, through the dark, through whatever's gaining on you. Locking that door, slamming it shut with a force that rattled the frame, was more than safety. It was a victory, a line drawn in the dirt. The third lesson landed as I pressed my back to the wood, chest heaving, peering out at an empty street. You claim your ground, even when it shakes. I'd made it, 80 yards from the trail's end to my Cape Cod, porch light glowing like a promise kept. And in that moment, I wasn't just a survivor. I was a fighter. The cops came, found nothing, but I'd found everything. Proof that I could stand, that I could lock out the dark and hold my own. Life hands you moments like that, when the ground quakes and the shadows loom, and it's tempting to shrink, to wait for rescue. Don't. Slam the door, turn the lock, stake your claim. You're not just hiding, you're building piece by piece a fortress of your own making. That deadbolt's click was my anthem, and you've got one too. Find it, sing it, make it yours. The aftermath, the sleepless night, the coffee, Mike's texts calling me unstoppable, wove the final lesson into my bones. The dark doesn't end you, begins you. I didn't just escape Pinewood Lane, I emerged from it stronger, fiercer, a version of me I hadn't met before. I turned that night into art, sketches of shadows and light that sold out at a fair, into hikes with friends, into a fire pit where we toasted to courage. It wasn't about forgetting the fear, it was about using it, letting it fuel something brighter. Life's shadows aren't endpoints. They're starting lines, invitations to run, to fight, to rise. I'd faced the shape in the dark, felt it chase me, and come out not just whole, but wholer. You will too. Your trails are out there. Maybe not dirt paths at midnight, maybe quiet struggles or loud storms, but they're yours to conquer, to transform, to claim as the forge where you become more. So here's the meaning, the heartbeat of this story. You're tougher than you know, built of fire and will, ready to burn through whatever steps out of the shadows. Pinewood Lane didn't break me. It built me, step by breathless step, into someone who knows her strength, her worth, her light. It's not just my tale, it's yours waiting in the wings. When your night comes, when your figure looms, don't turn away. Run toward it, through it, past it. Slam your door, claim your ground, turn your fear to flame. You're not just surviving, you're thriving, rising, becoming. That October night with its pines and its chase gave me a gift I'll carry forever. The truth that the dark doesn't win unless you let it. I didn't, you won't. We're runners, fighters, builders, forged in shadows lit by stars. Step out, lock in, rise up. The trail's yours, and so is the dawn. As the sun climbed higher that morning, spilling gold across the pines and washing my little porch in light, I stood there, coffee cup cradled in my hands, and let the night settle into memory. Pinewood Lane stretched out beyond my view. Quiet. Now, its dirt path unchanged by the chaos it had unleashed just hours before. But I was changed, cracked open, reshaped, forged anew in the fire of that chase. What began as a simple walk home from Mike's, a 2-mile trek I'd taken dozens of times, had turned into something bigger. A crucible, a mirror, a gift wrapped in shadow. That tall figure in the dark parka, those relentless footsteps pounding. 20 feet behind me, the sprint that tore through my lungs and lit my veins. They weren't just a story to tell over beers. They were a revelation, a raw, unshakable truth about who I am and what I'm capable of when the world tilts toward the unknown. The first lesson hit me as I stood there, watching the steam curl from my coffee into the crisp October air. Fear doesn't define you, it reveals you. I'd always thought of myself as steady. Lauren Harper, 32, graphic designer, the woman who could sketch through a storm and laugh off a power outage. But that night, when the figure stepped out of the shadows 40 feet back, when his slow, deliberate steps closed the gap, I felt fear in a way I hadn't before. Sharp, primal, a current that jolted me from my bones to my fingertips. It could have frozen me, turned me into a statue under those pines waiting for whatever came next. Instead, it woke me up. It lit a fire I didn't know I carried, a spark that said run, fight, live. Fear wasn't the enemy, it was the messenger, whispering that I had more inside me than I'd ever guessed. More grit, more will, more me. And you've got it too, that hidden ember, waiting for the wind to fan it into flame. When your shadows come, don't flinch. Listen, they're not here to break you. They're here to show you what you're made of. You've got your own lanes, your own shapes in the dark. Moments that step out of nowhere, hooded and silent, daring you to flinch. They'll come. Maybe not on a trail at midnight, maybe in a quiet room or a crowded day, but they'll test you. And when they do, don't shrink. Run toward the light, toward the you waiting on the other side. You're tougher than you know, braver than they expect, built of sparks that flare into flames when the wind howls. That night didn't break me. It built me, piece by jagged piece, into someone who knows what she can take and what she can give. It can build you too. The dark's just a canvas, the fire's in your hands. Paint with it, run with it, live with it. I did, and I'm still here, stronger, fiercer, free. Life's full of shadows like that. Moments that loom out of nowhere, that pursue you with relentless steps, daring you to break. But you don't just survive them. You claim them, turn them into something that fuels you. I did. I'd grown, up hearing my mom say, "Strength isn't loud, Lauren. It's what keeps you standing when the wind howls." That night I stood, ran, fought, lived. And every time I pass those pines now, I feel it. A spark, a strength, a version of me forged in that sprint through the dark. It's not just a trail anymore. It's a proving ground, a place where I learned what I'm made of. Not fear, not fragility, but fire, the kind that burns quiet until it roars. The days after stitched themselves together with small, steady victories. I told the story at Mike's a week later, sprawled on his deck with a beer in hand. The gang gathered around a fire pit that crackled and popped. "Your Pinewood's finest," Mike teased, tossing me a pretzel. And I laughed, the sound bright against the night. Word spread, neighbors whispered about some creep in the woods, and the local paper ran a blurb. "Mystery figure spooks resident on trail." No arrests, no answers, but folks started locking doors, walking in pairs, keeping porch lights on. I didn't hide from it. I couldn't. I started a ritual with friends, group hikes down Pinewood Lane, armed with flashlights and a Bluetooth speaker blasting rock anthems. We'd pack snacks, trail mix, thermos coffee, and turn the trail into ours, reclaiming it with laughter and light. One night, we built a fire pit near the trailhead, roasting marshmallows until the smoke stung our eyes, and Mike raised a stick in a toast. To Lauren, who stared down the dark and won. I grinned, cheeks warm from the flames, and felt it. Connection, courage, a tribe that saw me through. That chase didn't just change my nights, it changed me. I sketched a series inspired by it. Dark woods, a figure in shadow, a streak of light breaking through, and sold every piece at a local art fair, hands shaking as I handed them over. Fear turned to fuel, and I burned brighter for it. Took on bigger projects, said yes to risks I'd dodged before, let myself dream louder. Pinewood Lane wasn't a shortcut to dread anymore. It was a road to something bigger, something mine. Reminder that the dark doesn't win unless you let it. I didn't. I ran, I fought, I rose, and every step since has carried that fire, that night, that me I found when the shadows came calling. The footsteps faded, or maybe I'd outrun them, I couldn't tell through the roar in my ears. I tore up the driveway, keys slipping in sweaty palms, and jammed them into the lock with a twist that felt like triumph. The door flew open. I threw myself inside and slammed it shut, twisting the deadbolt with a force that rattled the frame. A sound as final as a gunshot. I pressed my back to the wood, chest heaving, breath coming in sharp, ragged bursts, and peered through the sidelight window. Nothing. Just the empty street bathed in the flicker of a lamppost half a block down. Crickets humming like the world hadn't just turned upside down. My phone buzzed in my pocket, jolting me. Mike, you home yet? Saw some creep lurking by the trail when I stepped out for a smoke. My blood turned to ice, stomach twisting into knots. Yeah, I texted. Back, fingers shaking so bad I nearly dropped the phone. Call the cops. I slid to the floor, knees buckling under me, and fumbled for 911. He chased me, I told the operator, voice steadier than my trembling hands, the words spilling out fast and rough. I'm safe now, but he's out there. Tall guy, dark, parka, Pinewood Lane. She was calm, her voice a lifeline through the static. Asking questions I answered on autopilot. Where, when, what he looked like. I clung to her words, to the promise of help, as my heartbeat slowed from a gallop to a thud. The cops rolled up about 15 minutes later. 2 officers in a cruiser, flashlights sweeping my yard like searchlights. I met them at the door, still, shaky but upright, and poured it all out. The figure in the dark, the chase, the terror that had clawed at me. They nodded, jotted notes in little pads, and promised to check the trail. Probably just a drifter, one said, but his partners, Frown, said they weren't so sure. They came back empty-handed. No tracks, no sign of my shadow man. Just the pines standing silent under a sliver of moon. Stay alert, they told me, handing over a card with a number scrawled on it, and drove off, leaving me with a racing pulse and a house that felt too quiet. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't, not with every creak of the floorboard sounding like footsteps, every gust against the windows like a hand testing the glass. I kept the lights on, brewed a pot of coffee that filled the kitchen with its bitter, grounding scent, and sat on the couch, phone clutched tight. Mike's texts lit up the screen, a tether to the world beyond my walls. You're unstoppable. Lauren, he wrote at 2 a.m., and I managed a smile, fragile but real, the kind that trembles at the edges but holds. Tougher than I look, I texted back, sipping coffee that scalded my tongue, grounding me in the burn. I replayed the night, The figure stepping out of the dark, the chase that turned my legs to fire, and felt something shift. Fear had come for me, sharp and swift, but I'd met it, run through it, claimed the other side. It wasn't just survival, it was triumph, small and shaky, but mine. Morning crept in slow, the sun spilling pink and gold over the pines, painting the world soft again. I stepped onto my porch, coffee cup warm in my hands, the steam curling up into the chill, and looked out at Pinewood Lane. It was still there, stretching quiet and unchanged, but it didn't own me, not anymore. That night had cracked me open, peeled back the layers I'd built. Artist, dreamer, woman who'd faced loss and kept going, and shown me a fire I hadn't known I carried. I'd seen the shape in the dark, felt it chase me through the woods, and I'd run, not away but through, fierce and alive and unbroken. The air tasted different that morning, cleaner, sharper, like it was new. And I stood there, 32 years old, a little bruised but whole, feeling the weight of what I'd done. That's when the fear hit. Not the slow creeping kind I'd brushed off before, but a sharp electric jolt that lit every nerve on fire. I've faced fears, spiders skittering across my basement floor, a car accident at 19 that left me bruised. But breathing, the call from my mom when Dad's heart gave out 5 years back. But this was different. Primal, a predator-prey pulse that reached back through time. "Back off!" I yelled, voice cracking now, a jagged mix of fury and terror. He didn't stop, 3 steps then 5, closing the gap, his hood swallowing any hint of eyes of humanity. My courage splintered, and I bolted, legs pumping, lungs burning, flashlight beam swinging wild like a drunk lantern. The trail blurred. Beneath me, roots snagging at my sneakers, branches clawing at the air, but I didn't care. Those footsteps came alive behind me, fast, light, relentless, maybe 20 feet back, matching my sprint, a shadow-given sound. I didn't look, just ran the end of the trail 150 yards off, streetlights glowing faint and golden through the tangle of pines. Running's never been my forte. I'm built for sketching late into the night, for dreaming over coffee, not racing through the dark. But that night, I flew. My chest ached, breath puffing white in the cold, but every stride was a fight, a refusal to let the night swallow me whole. I thought of my dad, who'd run marathons in his 40s, sweat-soaked and grinning at the finish line, telling me once over a backyard barbecue, "You don't quit when it hurts, Lauren. You push till it's over." I pushed. The footsteps pounded closer, 15 feet, maybe less, and I felt him, not just heard him, a presence stretching toward me, a weight pressing at my back like a hand about to grab. My flashlight caught glimpses of pines whipping past, their needles glinting silver in the beam, and I poured everything into that run. Every late shift, every tear-stained night, every time I'd clawed my way back from the edge. Home was 100 yards now, so close I could hear the hum of Maple Street, the faint buzz of civilization calling me back. I've always believed we're forged by what we face. Not the easy days, the lazy Sundays with pancakes and playlists, but the hard ones, the ones that strip you down and demand you dig deep. That night I dug. "You don't get me," I gasped, half to him, half to myself, voice lost in the wind, a ragged thread of defiance. The footsteps didn't falter, quick, steady, a hunter's pace, and my legs screamed, calves burning, lungs clawing for air, but I didn't stop. I thought of Mike, sprawled on his couch with a beer, oblivious to the storm I was running through, and wished I'd stayed. Wished I'd taken the long way around, the safe way, the one with streetlights and sidewalks. But regrets don't run. Trails, will does. I broke through the last curtain of pines, hitting Maple Street with a stumble that nearly sent me sprawling. My house 80 yards off, a little Cape Cod with a porch light burning gold, a beacon in the chaos. It was one of those October nights in upstate New York that feels like the earth itself is pausing to catch its breath. A cool, crisp evening where the air bites just enough to wake you up, and the sky stretches wide and clear, stars glinting, like shards of glass against the black. I'm Lauren Harper, 32, a graphic designer with a restless streak and a love for late nights, and that evening I was trudging home from my friend Mike's place. His house, a cozy 2-story with a sagging porch and a wood stove that always smelled faintly of cedar, sat about 2 miles from my little rental, on the edge of our quiet town. It was pushing 11 p.m., and I'd waved off the idea of an Uber. My bank account was lean and the night was too alive to resist. I wanted to walk, to feel the ground under me, to let the stillness shake loose the clutter of the day. There's this path I'd come to claim as my own, Pinewood Lane. It's not much to look at, just a half-mile dirt trail snaking through a dense thicket of pines, their branches tangling overhead to form a canopy that dims the moonlight to a soft, silver whisper. I'd walked it more times than I could count, headphones on, letting the solitude spark ideas, logos, sketches, half-formed dreams. That night I'd tugged on my gray fleece jacket, a thrift store find with a hood that smelled faintly of lavender from my detergent, and popped in my wireless earbuds. An indie playlist kicked in, all mellow guitars and drifting vocals, and I stepped onto the trail at 10:45, phone flashlight in hand. The beam danced over roots and rocks, casting long shadows that stretched and swayed with every step, and the air hit me sharp. Pine sap, damp earth, the faint tang of frost creeping in from the hills. My sneakers crunched softly on the gravelly dirt, a steady rhythm that matched the beat in my ears, and for a moment, I was alone in the best way. Untethered, free, just me and the night stretching out ahead. I was maybe 350 yards in, a little, past the halfway mark when the woods started to feel different. Not just quiet, but heavy, like they were leaning in, listening, waiting. My playlist hummed low, a thread of sound weaving through my thoughts, and I was sketching in my mind. Bold, jagged lines for a mural I'd pitched to a cafe downtown. Something to capture the wildness of fall. Walking's my sanctuary. It's where I unravel the knots of deadlines and doubts, where I feel the world settle into place. I'd already heard a few stray sounds behind me. Crunches, faint and scattered, first at 40 feet, then closer at 30. I'd brushed them off with a laugh, chalking it up to deer or maybe a raccoon rummaging for a late snack. I'd grown up 20. Miles west of here, chasing fireflies through fields and tracking animal prints in the snow with my brother. Nature was an old friend, not a threat. Just the woods doing their thing, I'd muttered, zipping my jacket higher against the chill, keeping my pace steady. Home was 200 yards off, a straight shot to Maple Street, and I could almost taste it. The creak of my couch, the weight of a blanket, maybe a glass of cheap Merlot to wind down. But then the night tilted, subtle at first, like a shift in the wind you don't notice until it's too late. My music stuttered, a quick glitch, barely a hiccup, and I tugged an earbud out, tilting my head to listen. That's when it hit. Quick, light footsteps, not the random crunch of before, but a patter. Deliberate and close, maybe 25 feet back. My heart kicked up, thudding hard against my ribs, and I stopped dead. Flashlight trembling just a fraction, in my grip. I swung it around, the beam slashing through the dark like a blade. And there he was, a figure tall, maybe 6'2", in a dark parka, hood pulled low, face swallowed by shadow. He stood stock still, about 40 feet off, just beyond the reach of my light, a silhouette etched against the pines. My breath caught, sharp and cold, and for a heartbeat I froze. 5'4", 130 pounds, alone in a sea of trees, staring at something that didn't belong. "Hey!" I shouted, voice raw with adrenaline, slicing through the stillness like a crack of thunder. "What's your deal?" He didn't move, didn't answer, just stood there, a statue carved from the night itself. My mind raced. Hiker lost on the trail? Neighbor I hadn't met? Something worse? I'd lived in this town 10 years, waved to folks on porches, swapped small talk at the diner. I knew these streets, these people, but Pinewood Lane at night was its own world, wild and unclaimed, and this guy didn't fit. I gripped my phone tighter, thumb brushing the edge of 911, and took a step forward, flashlight steady now, a lifeline in my hand. "You need help or what?" I called, forcing calm into the words, willing my voice not to shake. Still nothing. Then, slow as a nightmare unfurling, he took a step toward me, deliberate, measured, like he owned every inch of the dirt beneath him.